Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Louella Fernandes, CEO of Quocirca, and today I'm joined by Mark Asbridge from MyQ. We're really excited to be celebrating 5 years of the podcast, and we've got some great guests lined up for this series. Today, we'll discuss how MyQ is addressing and overcoming the challenges around print driver deployment and hearing more about MyQ printer provisioning profiles. So, Mark, great to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Really, thanks for having me. And I think I need to say happy 5-year anniversary for all your video recordings.
So could you tell us a bit about your career history briefly and tell us a bit about your role at MyQ?
Yeah, so I'm head of product enablement at MyQ. I've been at MyQ now for just over a year. But I've worked within the print industry for over 15 years, starting off as Xerox, as an OEM, before working for a very large independent reseller in the UK. My role now at MyQ, as part of the product enablement, is all around how we can support our sales teams, our training centres, our marketing teams, and obviously bringing all that information back into the product for the development of the product.
So MyQ has established a really great reputation around print management solutions and platforms. And before we get into the printer provisioning profiles that you've launched, could you tell us what led to the launch of that 3P, which I think is what you call it, and perhaps what are some of the common pain points customers are still seeing when it comes to print management and document workflows?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was something that was a lot led by our partner channel, because we launched printer provisioning on 10.2, and it was very much a phase one of our release. And then we started to researching and talking to our partners and understanding what their common pain points were. And that's kind of what led into development. So the real pain points was having this dynamic print enablement environment. It was all around having the right print queues at the right location. Because we start talking about security, and obviously in the ideal world, everybody's running a full follow me print secure environment, but we know that that's not the world that we live in. There is always that one printer or two printers, whether or not it's in a warehouse, whether or not it's on a CEO's desk, wherever it is, direct print is still required. And people were telling us that this is becoming more and more of a pain to manage. Everybody's moving towards more of a cloud environment with Entra joined based devices, and deploying print queues via Intune is quite problematic. It is achievable, but it's quite time consuming. So yes, there's other services like Microsoft Universal Print, but people still want to be able to control the deployment of direct queues, follow me queues, pull queues, all of the options people are after achieving. And from that sort of research, we kind of took that back and spent a lot of time with our developers and really working out a way that we can save an awful lot of time for our partners, but meeting the modern security requirements. But also at the same time, taking MyQ's philosophy of making everything as simple and as easy and as efficient as possible. So it's all about being a user-centric product. But we also need to understand that MyQ is focusing very much on our partners and the IT teams that are building and configuring the system. And we took that into place when we started developing it to make sure we had the features there for those partners to implement the product efficiently.
Yes, it's always a real balance, isn't it, between user experience and IT management, admin kind of tasks. And we definitely have seen in our research that some of the key challenges around print management are print driver deployment, IT, administrative burden, and so on. So it sounds like you're addressing a lot of those challenges. And actually another one is managing a legacy print fleet with different drivers and different vendors and different devices and so on. So could you tell us a bit more about printer provisioning profiles and expand on what the capabilities are and how that does help reduce IT costs and improve user productivity as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not going to go too technical into the nitty gritty of how the system works, and you can see our webinars and our training modules for the full details. But the whole philosophy of printer provisioning profiles, as I like to call it, 3P, because I've said it way too many times, is the fact that it's all about capturing drivers once. Okay, so the whole philosophy is rather than having to install multiple print queues, capture them one by one, you're just capturing the functionality, whether or not it's a HP, Quocirca, Ricoh driver with finishing options, black and white, double-sided color, whatever the options are that you use, because a lot of the time people use the same set of settings every time, because they are a single OEM, or they are doing the same driver sets time and time again. So it's all about capturing the right drivers at the right time, uploading them into the system. And then basically what we're doing through a thing called a profile is you can then create a printer package linking those driver sets. And what that means is you can say to all users within the company, you can say a particular department or a particular user, only if they're in a particular location. So you can say if John Smith, for example, is at site office A, he will then get the HQ print queue. So it's all about being dynamic print queues associated. But from an IT point, it's all about how we can make that really quick and really efficient. So the idea is that they upload the driver, they create a profile, they then create a queue name, they associate the queue port within MyQ, and then they add the driver sets. It's 3 boxes, click, 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 done. But I always like to explain it, that's the manual process of creating that as an upload. You're then creating the profile and everything. Whereas we also know that people have large deployments that they need to be doing. And in those large deployments, they want to pre-configure a template file, so a CSV file from Excel. They want to kind of have all of those parameters outlined so that they can just import it. So again, part of the feedback from our partners was they're not always in the environment. They're not always on a client's PC, so capturing drivers and doing the build out in that kind of scenario is quite problematic. So they wanted it to be only server led. So that's kind of why we had these import export routines. So you can export your driver sets, you can export all the profiles, you can create the profiles in Excel and import that directly into the system. It's all about this massive time saving. So it's my favorite line is the right print queue to the right person at the right location. But that's great. But we want to make it simple for IT. We want to make it simple for our partners. So it's one of those ones which, when we actually started reviewing the product and seeing it work at the end, it was, the word I want to use was underwhelming, because it just works. It's just simple. And you kind of look at it and go, oh, why didn't we do that before? And this is where I was being really pleased to launch this to the market, because there's so much benefit to what it's going to be doing.
Yeah, and like you say, IT doesn't want any more complexity around prints. Usually it's a case of print is already taking up enough of their time. So yeah, that sounds really encouraging. And you mentioned, I just wanted to pick up, because you mentioned on document confidentiality and also identity management, when you sort of talked about Entra ID and how identity is changing. Did you want to talk a bit about that in terms of MyQ's platform in general? Because we are seeing this move, as you say, to a more cloud-centric approach to print management, but that also brings with it concerns around security and how users are authenticated and so on. So how is MyQ addressing those areas? Yeah,
I completely agree that the world is changing when we're talking about security and Entra and things, because people are moving away from the legacy Active Directory domains. And when we start talking about print really is still designed to work with what we call the SAM account name, the legacy Active Directory name. And that's become quite a problem in worlds when people move to Entra only based devices, or whether or not you look at Boyd based devices, because then you end up with these generic account names or a UPN name, and that to then associate into a print management system is quite complicated. Then that's the beauty of MyQ. So MyQ's desktop client tool, it handles all of that basis for you. So the same application that we're utilizing to do the printer provisioning profile deployment, our 3P, that also handles the authentication process. So that has single sign-on with Entra, or it can do Active Directory single sign-on if necessary. But the idea is it's one tool for us that handles all the authentication processes, which will then handle all of the print queue deployments at the same time. It also supports functionalities like failover printing and client spooling or device spooling. It's one tool for us that is installed that manages the whole entire environment. So it's fantastic for that basis. But we also talk about security on direct printing. And I think this is something that a lot of the market kind of oversees, especially when you have a multiple site configuration where everything is joined together. My example always to this is like a CEO that moves between office locations, and he has his own printer in his office or in an open office. And what happens is when they travel between sites, sometimes they forget that they're no longer at that office where their printer is, and they click print. And obviously, generally speaking, being a CEO, they've got confidential data that they need to be printing. And the whole philosophy and the idea behind 3P is that it's designed then to automatically remove that printer. So not only are we handling that authentication process through one desktop client tool, we're also deploying the right printers at the right location for the right person. So it's kind of an end-to-end process.
Yes, it's something that we're seeing in our research is that organizations are still using basic or Windows authentication for their print environment. And like you say, there's a lot of security risks around that, particularly if it's just password protected rather than sort of more sophisticated identity management. So it's certainly something we're watching. And something I wanted to ask you actually is around, we see a very strong differentiator for MyQ is that it's always had a very strong and robust cloud print and scan platform. And certainly we're seeing as print volumes decline, scan volumes are actually increasing as organizations are accelerating their digitization initiatives. I was just curious, just a couple of questions on that. Firstly, are you seeing that customers are understanding the benefit of cloud print as a way to eliminate print servers? Is that kind of a trend you're seeing? And secondly, in terms of scan, are you seeing scan usage in terms of the MyQ platform increasing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interesting question. A lot of people have asked me that one about the whole digitizations and cloud migrations and everything. And clearly cloud is very predominant in the market. The only thing I will always kind of not argue, but kind of say back is it's quite interesting when you start talking to different regions, different parts of the world. I mean, I've spent quite a lot of time in like the APAC region, and their sort of cloud migration is quite a lot behind Europe. So for us, yes, if we start talking about Europe, moving to the cloud is really quite key. But again, even when you start talking in Europe, you need to understand the business and what their goals are. If you're talking small SME, then yes, they are removing all of their servers. They are very much going cloud first. But if you then start talking to enterprise or to government or high security environments, they're still not completely into the trust of cloud. Yes, that adoption is coming, but it's coming quite slowly. So it's always one of those ones. The answer is yes, we are moving to the cloud, but it depends. And that's kind of why I always like to have those conversations with customers and partners to sort of say, well, what is your goals? What is your objectives? And then understanding that what product will then fit into that particular market. And we are investing a lot into our sort of cloud environments to make sure that we're meeting that next level environment. But then also come to a point where you're saying people are reducing their fleet and reducing their print. I think from a software provider of print management, we're actually seeing an increase in adoption because people are removing their fleet of devices and reducing the fleet, but then they're going into a shared standard open plan office. Well, then they need security. So where they would have had maybe 10 or 15 devices in an office between 100 people, now they might only have 1 or 2 devices, but there's still the same number of people printing. They then need to adopt that secure environment to make sure that they're managing their print. When we start talking about scanning and digitization, well, when you start talking about a print management system, especially that's got a very strong scanning capabilities, that actually enables the devices to be a lot more intelligent and a lot more powerful for what they can do, because the fact that MyQ is the one that's controlling it. We're not reliant on the device's software, the device's security levels, the device's connectivities, what apps it supports. MyQ takes over and does that all for you. So we're seeing more requests from people wanting additional scanning processes. We've really enhanced our OneDrive and SharePoint scanning processes so we can make them really customizable based on the feedback that we're getting from our partners.
I totally agree. I think, and it's interesting you mentioned we're seeing also more pages, but on less devices. So there's still that need to manage that from a fleet management perspective as well as security perspective. And in terms of print servers, we're actually seeing a bit of a increase in print server adoption because for the reasons you mentioned in terms of security concerns, data sovereignty concerns, particularly for large enterprises. So we always think that, it's very much a hybrid approach. And maybe this is a good opportunity actually to talk about MyQ's portfolio, because MyQ obviously has MyQ X, MyQ Roger, and maybe you could explain a bit about that and then tell us what's coming next for MyQ.
Yeah, as you're right, Louette, we have both our MyQ X and our MyQ Roger platform. So our MyQ X has been in the industry for many, many years, installed on hundreds of thousands of devices. It's our sort of flagship product that we talk about. And then we have our MyQ Roger, which is our cloud-first application. And again, that supports all of the modern printing office environments where we have all of our secure printing and scanning and digitization. But as you kind of alluded, what's next? And that is our MyQ Next application, which we announced to the industry in September. And this is very much looking at what we've learned on both products. So when we start looking at MyQ Roger, we've learned about the scalability, the actual architectural design in the background of how we can make it a multi-tenant solution. But we then look at our MyQ X functionalities of all of that personalization, customizations of what we can do. We look at all of the rules and routings and policies and really all the enhanced things that we require part of the product. And kind of the idea is utilizing our MyQ X functionalities, but building that on an architecture designed by MyQ Roger. So we're really sort of joining the two architectural designs of the application into one. So it's still a bit too early to talk about some of the real core functionalities, but seeing how the team's designing it, taking the feedback that we're supplying from the industry and making sure that this is a product that can scale massively and it will be available in multiple scenarios as well. And I think that's the real key takeaway here is where if you've got an on-premise private server or a private cloud, or you want a multi-tenanted public cloud solution, MyQX will be that product for you, and it'll be able to support all the features that people are expecting to see from a cloud print management, but now. So that's something I'm really excited to be talking more detail about later in the year, where we can actually start showing it and explaining more functionalities and exactly how it works, and especially the architectural design come from an IT background.
Yeah, no, that sounds very exciting because certainly we've seen a lack of feature parity between the kind of cloud first type of print management solutions and the on-prem versions for different reasons, because they've been architected differently and sometimes they're not built as cloud native solutions. And I think what MyQ is doing with MyQ Next sounds really encouraging in terms of bringing the best of both worlds together. So we'll definitely be looking out for more information on that as and when you announce that. So before we finish the conversation, I really appreciate you providing that insight into printer provisioning profiles, or 3P. Any thoughts on also what's next for the print industry? There's been a lot of changes and consolidation in the market, and like you say, that there's been the shift to cloud. Is there anything in particular that you think 2026 holds for the industry? No,
so I think 2026 there's going to be a shift within the industry, and I think that shift is very much coming from Windows protected prints. I've seen many other interviews recently with some of my competitors, and we're talking about Windows protected print. And honestly, Microsoft want to break everything related to print. It's the only way I can describe it. But equally, I understand why when we start talking about security and how print drivers interact with the driver stack within Microsoft. I completely understand it from a security and compliance point of view. But it's really shaking the industry, and it's making a lot of people kind of look up and go, oh, we've got to change everything here related to print. And that all comes around the printer support apps, because they're removing all those drivers. They're going down a native IPPS driver. And then you have a printer support app, which will then become your sort of driver pane, your driver window that you can then apply those settings. But it's taking time for those manufacturers to adopt that and actually develop that, and actually have all the features and functionalities that customers require. So from my point of view, that's a huge change in the market. And equally, the question from you back to me could be, well, Mark, you've just told us about how we're going to be capturing drivers and deploying drivers, but you've just launched 3P. Isn't that kind of directly against that functionality? And the answer is yes, you are correct. However, the whole design of the application is all around how that will then integrate with Windows Protected Print in the future. People are still going to need direct print queues. They're going to need pull print queues. That's not changing. What's changing is actually what the settings are in the user's environment. So the product we've just developed will have that support in the future for that functionality. So for me, yeah, the biggest change is Windows Protected Print. Everybody still loves talking about AI. And as much as I love AI, when people always say to me, what are you building into the product? And the question is, MyQ is so simple to install and configure, where it's got the auto onboarding routines, it's got the automatic synchronizations, the customization that it can do. You don't need AI in our products to make it work. It's just designed to be correct in the first place. But with AI, we're also looking at how we leverage that within our documentations, our partner portal, and recently we just delivered it in our partner portal. So again, the whole idea is that our partners can use very much a chatbot to question tickets or look up information and all those kind of bits and pieces. So it's all about, yes, using AI, but using AI where AI makes sense, not just because it sounds buzzy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of trying to shoehorn AI into a lot of marketing at the moment. And I think in the print industry, it's, very specific use case scenarios such as predictive maintenance, hardware security, which is more machine learning rather than AI. So, but I think your point about Microsoft is spot on. Because they've re-engineered the whole sort of printing subsystem, it's just had a massive impact. And I think OEMs and ISVs are having to figure out how to address some of those changes. And it sounds like MyQ is future-proofing its platform to help its customers future-proof their print management tasks. So we'll put some further information on a 3P into the show notes. So if anyone wants more information on printer provisioning profiles, we'll share the links, and also a webinar that you recently presented as well. So, but that just leaves me to thank you again for your time. It's always great speaking to you, Mark.
Yeah, no, it's always nice to talk. And if you want more information about MyQ, you know where we are.
Thank you for joining today's episode of In the Spotlight with Quocirca. For more information, please go to quocirca.com and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.